Kids do grow up fast. It feels as if only yesterday I was taking wings via giant airlines. Only yesterday I was conquering sheer cliffs with my trusty steed. But in fact, it has been 10 years. I guess I'm not a child anymore. Then I've got a question. Why in the world am I still here? All my peers have already married, got a job, bought a house, and are now choosing toys for their upcoming babies. And here I am, still trying to collect all the stones of Baranzia. Shit, what's more annoying? I'm screeching and blowing my fuses now, only because I climbed out of the game to tell you this. As soon as I get back into this chill world of Nords and stolen sweet rolls, everything will be totally fine again. And by the way, this time it won't be just the usual world, but the brand new Anniversary Edition world. The only question is, why? I've already bought Skyrim. How many? At least 5 times. But I'll buy it again, and I'll pay for it again. And to the glory of Todd Howard, of course. Why else? Actually, no. I'll do it for other reasons. For the same reasons that make you return to Skyrim and support the game that is over a decade old. Actually, no. I'll do it for other reasons. For the same reasons that make you return to Skyrim and support the game that is over a decade old. Yes, you got it right. It's not the man from the memes who is to blame for Skyrim's longevity, but you. Alright, I think we're done with this one. Okay, that was just another unfunny joke on my part. It's a little more complicated than that. And today we'll try to spill some light on this topic. Why won't gamers quit the game that was released in 2011? And what do human cognitive capacities have to do with it? What constitutes the classical Bethesda game design? Why is it so annoying, yet we tolerate it nonetheless? What's the secret behind the Skyrim phenomenon? We'll try to answer all of these questions. You're on Drigmatic. Let's go. First, let's recall how it all started. It's November 2011. The hype for the game is at its peak. The trailer with infamous Fusroda forever cemented the phrase into gamers' lexicon, while the cinematic, which by the way looks decent to this very day, made everyone go absolutely bonkers. Such promos and game theories make a fertile soil that encourages the fans to let their creativity run wild. But we'll get to that. For now, they're busy waiting on the edges of their chairs. The numbers on the Figueroa Hotel billboard, where the promos of the world's most anticipated promos are displayed, say it all. On November the 11th, 2011, the game begins its path to take over the whole world. From the get-go, 7 million sold copies within the first week grant Skyrim its place in Guinness World Records. Press reviews, which consist exclusively of 9s and 10s, are also something to be proud of. The icing on the cake, however, is the review from an old and respectful Japanese video game magazine, Famitsu. It has never ever given any Western release its highest score, 40 out of 40. Until now. As you may have guessed, the tradition was broken by Todd Howard's masterpiece. Apart from Skyrim, there since has been only one game that managed to do the impossible once more: Rockstar's GTA 5. As for today, more than 35 million copies have been sold, and I doubt that this is the limit. After having released 2 special legendary and anniversary editions, nothing prevents Todd from releasing some Gold Ultra Deluxe edition. Skyrim is still kicking. People still buy it. People still play it. Yet even such a great impulse that the game was given at the very start couldn't fuel it for a whole decade. Which means that we have to look at what happened after gamers first set their feet on the northern lands of Tamriel. An open world is what happened. And my god, was it gorgeous! No matter where you go and what you do, everything becomes an adventure, which always concludes with a fight with some damn Draugr or freaking dragon. But it's not the Draugr that matters. What matters is how the player ends up fighting it, the adventure itself. The map of Skyrim wasn't the largest when the game came out. 37 square kilometers could hardly impress even a gamer from 2011. Even Oblivion, which was released in 2006, could boast a map that measured more than 40 square kilometers. However, the devs learned from their mistakes, and this time they chose quality over quantity. If in TES4 they often resorted to auto-filling dungeons with pre-made assets, here they abandoned this strategy and flooded Skyrim with various points of interest and slightly yet different dungeons. This encouraged thorough world exploration and created a sense that there was something special around every corner. And this sense wouldn't allow us to take a break from the game, because even the Draugr could be just a prelude for something greater, and we believed in it. Another cool aspect was the fact that one single situation could have multiple outcomes. Bethesda is known for providing a variety of possible scenarios for each adventure in their games. So, the devs offer a great set of tools for the player to develop his cognitive capacities. A research called The Changing Face of Video Games and Video Gamers indicates that diversity of in-game possibilities make the player more invested in the gameplay process and enhances its repetitiveness, trying out something new every time. What does it mean? It means that in the first playthrough, the player can craft himself the best armor and weapons, thus maxing out his smithing skill. In the second playthrough, the player can ignore all the crafting and charge at everything and everyone with a pulse. And this way, he won't be able to actually smith the best armaments, yet he sure will be able to take them from others. It doesn't matter if you can't use the smithing hammer, when you can always use your sword. Let's also not forget about immersion. Skyrim assists the player by providing both first-person and third-person point of views. This was also marked in the research. For example, in the first playthrough, the player would choose a first-person point of view for maximum immersion, as if he's going through all the adventures by himself. The second time, he would choose a third-person point of view and would play as a girl. Why not? Why not? You've created a new character and can now take part in his or her development. Especially when in real life, things didn't go exactly well with the character development of your own. Quite a few ways to play one single game. Stealth, magic, craft, melee, first person, third person. I'm sure that if we take a good dive into Skyrim files, we will find second-person point of view as well. But that's not the point. The point is that with great diversity comes great chaos, which is the boogeyman for all game designers. However, Bethesda has came up with a solution. It's called iteration, the cornerstone of Bethesda's games. How does it usually happen? You want to create a big level, and in order to do it, you divide the process into separate parts. You work on each one of them, you conduct various tests, and you advance from particulars to generals. In Bethesda, we include an element called iteration. We take a gameplay chunk from the main story and we work on it. Then we take another equal chunk of gameplay for every other level in the game and we work on it as well. Then we do the same with the remaining part of the main story and with every level. The process goes on until the whole game is finished. Such an approach allows to preserve the integrity of the game on every production stage. And when we're talking about a huge role-playing game, integrity becomes a #1 priority. What will happen to the main quest if the player kills some main story NPC in a side quest? Bethesda tried to take all of this into account, and in the end they succeeded. The main quest wasn't praised to the skies, yet the NPC interaction was quite satisfying. Multiplayer games are observed to stimulate the reward system in the human brain more than single-player games. Of course, these words initially referred to MMOs, but this can also be said about the simulation of social interactions with NPCs in Skyrim, who possesses quite a decent AI. For a 2011 game, I mean.
Wait, I know you. The only mistake was you showing your face. That's something I'm supposed to deliver.
However, today there are hundreds, if not thousands of mods which were made to conceal the game's age. Speaking of fan activity, the fact that the game was easily modded was much appreciated by Bethesda's most handy and creative fans. An avalanche of mods covered the realm of nods in a blink of an eye. The developers' willingness to cooperate with the fans is greatly responsible for the game's longevity. So it's partly because of the fans' efforts that Todd Howard sells us Skyrim for the 12th time already. I think that means something.
Who's laughing now?
You may say that all of the above is just a standard set of elements for Bethesda games, but let me tell you this.
You're goddamn right.
Yes, it's a typical Bethesda game. Typical, shameless amount of bugs and mistakes. Interestingly, often they have the same origins as the love of fans. Let's take the desire to control everything on every production stage. Such an approach leads to the gameplay's oversimplification. How to make things equal if magic and melee, for example, work differently, which gives mages and warriors different sets of strong suits and weaknesses, forcing them to seek different ways of resolving the same situation. That's right, by equalizing both melee and magic, reducing their differences to a minimum, thus losing the player's curiosity to try new combat styles. Genius. No. Morrowind had none of this, which allowed players to make up new battle mechanics on the basis of the soul system that had been presented to them by the developers. As said, the tendency towards casualization is visible since TES Oblivion. However, if then the devs were experimenting, unsure which simplification path to choose, then in Fallout 3 they were pulling up experience only to present as a product with an acceptable degree of casualness, mixed with decent gameplay. Skyrim was made a game simple enough to welcome a newbie, yet addictive enough so that the newbie wouldn't leave it for at least 20 or so hours. TES 5 is an unusual combination of all the worst from Bethesda's game design, with the best parts of its former hardcore. Yes, you heard it right. Bethesda's game design is bad because of the very things that are supposed to make it good. 5 years ago, Hugbox even called such game design insulting. And you know what? The internet agreed with him. Skyrim's puzzles that amount to quite literally matching a picture of an animal on the wall with the rotating statue beneath it. I'd call it child's play, but I'm pretty sure 5-year-old me wouldn't have considered match the picture a puzzle. So I guess we can say that the adventures of Dragonborn were skating on the edge of thin ice, yet managed not to fall. Total casualization of the combat system, level-up system and dungeon puzzles did Skyrim more harm than good, yet it still can compete with Fallout 4, where even the classic RPG dialogue system wasn't spared. So I guess we can say that the adventures of Dragonborn were skating on the edge of the thin ice, yet managed not to fall. They were close though. On the release, along with great hype, the game had an equally great amount of bugs, some of which haven't been fixed to this very day. Did you know that northern Tamriel foxes can somehow smell danger and treasure? That's why they always lead the player to a den of thugs or a treasure chest. I didn't. Until last August, when previously mentioned to Joel Burgess, indulged in reminiscing about times past, and revealed that such bug does exist and has a rational explanation. Skyrim uses an invisible 3D sheet of polygons that is laid over the world, telling AI where it can and cannot go. In most situations, you see what AI decides to do. Run at the player, flee and hide. Foxes are no different, but their AI is very simplified. They basically can only run away, and quite often they run towards some point of interest, because it has a lot of navigating triangles. As you can see, the bug is encrypted into the game's code, and judging by 2017 Nintendo Edition, no one gives a damn about it, because all the original game's flaws and major bugs remained unfixed. What's more annoying, it's not the only example. The very basics of the game's design, like furniture or NPCs, were made with the help of such temporary solutions. Dressers in the game are in fact wardrobes that were intentionally sunk into textures, and an NPC's inventory is in fact a chest hidden under the NPC itself. Truth be told, some issues have been fixed. For example, the inability to save your progress after 20 hours of playing on 7th generation consoles. But that's not just a bug, that's a fucking problem which doesn't let you play the goddamn game. Of course they'd fix it. Apart from that, rocks are floating above the ground just like back in 2011. And despite all this, the game wasn't instantly forgotten as a tester's worst nightmare. In fact, quite the opposite. The game managed to survive for so long largely thanks to these rocks. After all, it's the beloved imperfection that makes a large part of the game's charm. I'm sure I'm not the only one dissatisfied with the main story that looks more like a concept rather than a finished plot. I'm not the only one frustrated by the absolute sameness of the combat systems. I'm not the first one, nor the last one, to get stuck in textures, to an extent where I have to load a save made like 3 hours ago. But nonetheless, I'm one of those who return to the northern part of Tamriel each year for at least about 20 hours. And I think that the secret behind the Skyrim's phenomenon lies within the answer to the question, why am I doing it? Partly it's the developers' mistakes that are treated and accepted without anger. To illustrate how the bugs are being deconstructed within the game's community, let's take the guy from Whiterun, who used to be an adventurer like us, and then took an arrow in the knee. Remember him? You can also encounter NPCs like him in Markers, Winterhold, you name it. All these wannabe adventurers speak about their misfortune so often that it makes you want to hang yourself. But gamers treated it with irony and laughter. The developer's flaw became a meme. And memes never die.
Memes. The DNA of the soul.
The community that has formed around the Dragonborn has truly eternalized it. I've already mentioned various mods and unofficial patches, but how about full-scale games based on Skyrim? Bethesda is perfectly aware of the importance of handy gamers, by the way. Unsuccessful attempt of cooperating with the community in the face of Creation Club has become something more or less acceptable after numerous perturbations. And the new version of Skyrim is sold in the bundle with all the mods you can find there. More than that, to prevent modders' legacy from extinction, the developers sent a version of New Skyrim to the creator of Skyrim Script Extender beforehand, so that he would adjust his mod to the new version of the game. If you don't know what SSE is, then just Google it. It will be worth your time. If not, then let me tell you this. It's one of the key mods that affected the amount of user content in the game. But there are other things besides mods. How many casual stories that mention the game from Todd Howard and co. are there? Let's take the joke about the Stones of Baranzia from the beginning of the video. To be frank, it's not really a joke. But I'm not giving up. I may be over a quarter century old, so what? I'm not the only one who struggles to quit the game. There is a great variety of stories that involve TS5. In some of them, the game plays a secondary role, yet in some, it's the main character. Just like in that story where a player imbued two swords with captured souls of two sworn enemies and hung them on the wall, one overlaying the other. Philosophical, isn't it? But what's the most important? That the game mechanics allow to do such stuff. This has also heavily contributed to Skyrim's popularity. Of course, the field of experiments wasn't as large as in Morrowind. But still, few games can offer such a fertile ground for creativity, especially today. It creates funny situations and provides unusual ways of going through the same quests, speaking of the player's cognitive capacities. Plus, the player will then gladly tell his friends about his adventures, thus launching the rumor mill, to which I owe my acquaintance with the game. To be honest, the previously mentioned marketing campaign was far too aggressive for me. But when a friend of mine told me how he encountered a talking stray dog that had its own quest, and continued to roam Skyrim with his new furry companion instead of completing its quest, I decided to give this game a chance. And I sure wasn't disappointed. And by the way, Barbas's, the dog's name, quest is my favorite in the entire game. I remember struggling with the final choice: kill the dog and get a powerful weapon, or spare it and get nothing. At least back then I thought I'd get nothing. In the end, I was very proud of myself. Not only have I spared the poor doggy, but got a cool artifact as well. But this quest I remember because of its ending, while the storyline of the Thieves Guild has sunk into my heart because of its truly Shakespearean drama. Perhaps I'm the only one who saw the brush of the English literary master in the chain of monotonous quests. But damn, betrayal, revenge, murdering the mentor who represents the archetype of a father, it's all there. The guild's lifestyle was also quite appealing. To live in Suez beneath Riften, a place that is extremely hard to access, with an only ray of sunlight piercing the darkness, reaching the city's filthiest spot. Filthiest not because it accumulates all the waste of human vital activity, but because it gathers all the waste of society. An atmosphere just for me. None of Bethesda's other games has formed such associations in my brain. And to be more precise and less subjective, no matter how similar TS5 may seem to be to other games of the company, it's still a thing of its own. First, the surroundings that will be remembered by me and many others who have set their foot to the snowy part of Tamriel. Skyrim initiated the Scandinavian trend in the video game industry. True, there were games with an atmosphere of Northern Europe before Skyrim, but I can't recall any release that could compete with TS5 in terms of scale. Today, huge titles that involve Vikings and the Pantheon of Odin are quite common. God of War 2018, Banner Saga, Assassin's Creed Valhalla, Valheim. But as for 2011, all these games are yet to come, and Skyrim is already here. with Nordic legends, dragons, snowy mountaintops, and rivers of honey. Entourage, inspired by both poetic and prose eddas, did the game good service. Test 5 stood out not only from the list of Bethesda's creations, but from the stream of video game news. The fact is visible even today. People still use the hashtag Skyrim on Twitter to share particularly good screenshots from the game or its passages, recreated on canvas. However, visual satisfaction isn't the only type that gamers experience while trying to capture the beauty of honey and Nordic lands. The style of in-game characters is also quite catchy. Just take the Horned Iron Helm. There will be hardly any gamer who wouldn't recognize it. Smith and channels forge in-game armaments in real life, while cosplayers recreate in-game outfits and admire the thoroughness that Bethesda's designers have put into it. What's even more fantastic, this fan movement carries on since the game's first promos. Remember I talked about the activity of the fanbase even before Skyrim came out. Take for example the clip by Harry Partridge, where a young man leaves his family and relationships so he could fully dedicate himself to the rivalry of Stormcloaks and the Imperials. It was quoted by literally everyone back in the day. And keep in mind that back then YouTube hasn't yet become the multimedia giant that it is today. Yet still, at school breaks we used to rewatch the clip over and over again, and to hum the catchy tune inspired by the game's main theme afterwards.
The adventure of my life in the land of Skyrim!
Speaking of which, the music. Boy oh boy. Jeremy Soule did his best so that if gamers ever forget how Skyrim looks, they'd never forget how it sounds. Marvelous, soothing ambient, with lots of choir, coats you from head to toe and just doesn't let go. The soundtrack is so good that you can hear it not only in the taverns of Northern Tamriel, but also at various Philharmonic Orchestra concerts, let alone the song about the return of the Dragonborn. I'm pretty sure it needs no introduction. Because after very little time after the game's release, it has inspired fan works such as this. The game design itself, along with broken auto-leveling, will not exactly please the player. But somehow, almost miraculously, the game managed to keep the balance between Soulsborne level difficulty and boring casualness, becoming neither of two. The game allows you to level up your character relatively quick, so that you come back to admire the sky-piercing peaks while slaying hordes of bandits, playing as a Khajiit or an Argonian this time. It's the conciliation with the game's flaws, which you accept and even love, that turns Skyrim into a game that every gamer needs from time to time. It's the conciliation with the game's flaws, which you accept and even love, that turns Skyrim into a game that every gamer needs from time to time. A tongue-in-cheek title where you can always spend some of your time. To come back to once a year for a few dozen hours, pick a new race and create a heavily armored mage. What else can a gamer ask for? In conclusion, the secret behind the Skyrim's phenomenon lies in the combination of both facts and coincidences. Bethesda's classical game design, fact. However, particularly in Skyrim, it wasn't really irritating. Coincidence. The game certainly wasn't the first to use Scandinavian setting. Fact. However, particularly Skyrim's representation of it was so good that the game is still being played. Coincidence. Test 5 has become extremely outdated. Fact. However, it was released at the turning of technologies. That's why its graphics and passages still look decent after a little bit of polishing. It's likely that even in Bethesda they don't have an answer to why did the game blow up so much, because the Fallout series too has a huge fanbase. Yet no one is rushing to relaunch the third game, let alone the fourth. The amount of reproach prevails over positive reviews, which only demotivates the developers, while Skyrim is still selling and is still being loved. We may play it for a couple of hours in 100 days, yet we do it every single year. It has been this way and it will be this way even when the gates to Oblivion open once again, to let out Todd Howard with Test 6 in his hands. Well, you get my meaning. Skyrim will be with us till the cows come home. And so will our channel. If you liked this first episode of the new rubric, then press like and let us know in the comments. Sharing this video will also encourage us to do more episodes like this. See you soon on Drigmatic.